to Shelly Telly, where I blog about my life. And today I want to talk about making bread. How many of you all out there have a bread maker? I have a bread maker, which I love, but I haven't used it in a while. Now that I'm retired though, I'm very excited about getting back into it. I think I've had 3 bread makers over the course of my life. My first one I got when my oldest son was just newborn. I think he was just a baby. And let's see, he's going to be 25, so it was like 25 years ago. Boy, it was a long time ago. Bread makers had just first come out, I think, around that time, that were affordable. And I got a bread maker and I absolutely loved it. And one of the main reasons that I wanted a bread maker was because I was trying to save money. And so I figured out the cost of how much it costs to make a loaf of bread in my bread maker. This was 25 years ago now, remember. And after I added up the cost, it was actually cheaper than a regular loaf of bread at the store. So I think I figured it was between, at that time, it was between 60 and 80 cents per loaf. And I was using half whole wheat and half regular flour. And on the bread maker recipe little book that I had, I started putting a little tally mark on the back for every loaf of bread I made, because I figured that by the time I had made 100 loaves, then I would have way surpassed, actually it would have been like 75 loaves. After I'd made 75 loaves, then I would have paid for the cost of the bread maker, which was $100, $99 or something like that. And after 100, I think I went to like 200 and something, and then I quit making tally marks on the back of my recipe book, because it had 2 times over paid for itself and saved me money on bread, and it was still going strong. So it finally did, though. It actually, the little piece at the bottom finally did break, and my dad actually fixed that back, and so it worked for many more years after that. I don't even know how many years. I'm sure it was at least 10, 15 years that I had that bread maker. Anyway, a couple years ago, Charlie bought me a new bread maker, a Breadman bread maker, which I really love. So I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay, so this is my bread maker, and I actually crocheted a cover for it. This is back when crocheting, I used to love to crochet and crochet all kinds of things, but I can't anymore. It hurts my fingers. I think I have arthritis in my fingers now. But anyway, so this comes off, and here's my Breadman bread maker. I can't remember how much Charlie paid for it, but we got it on a deal because it was a display model, I think. So it has all kinds of settings, which I've not even explored. One of these days I will. But for right now, my main thing is just making a white bread that I usually put oatmeal in, so I'll have to tell you the recipe that I do. So this little compartment here is in case you wanted to add something like raisins or something. There's a particular time in the bread maker cycle when this thing will pop open down there. Let's lift the lid up, and you can see this closes, and then that will pop open at a particular time and drop that stuff in here. So here's what the mixing thing looks like. I love this bread maker because it makes a 2-pound loaf, where my very first one only made a 1.5-pound loaf. So this thing right here just pops out, and you put all your ingredients in here, and this thing this is the paddle that kneads the dough, and it comes right off. Oops. It comes right off, And you can see that it's kind of dug a little hole in here, but it hasn't affected anything at all, and it's not coming off or anything. So I just love it. So I'm going to show you how I make a loaf of bread in this Breadman bread maker. Okay, the first thing I like to do is, even though this is a non-stick thing, I still like to go ahead and put some olive oil just so it helps not to stick so much. And I love this thing right here. I don't know if anybody else has one of these, but spray that comes out of a can has got some chemicals in it that are not good for you. And this is something that we got from Bed Bath & Beyond, and you put olive oil in it and then you pump it up and then it will spray. Now it doesn't spray too wonderfully. Sometimes it comes out in kind of a stream instead of a spray, but still, I really love this thing and I use it all the time. So then after I spray the container with olive oil, then the next thing I do is I put in the water, which is, you know, warm, not hot, but also a little bit warmer than room temperature. So I pour that in my container, and then whenever I'm making up a loaf of bread, sometimes especially I used to, put all the ingredients except for like the butter, the water, and the yeast, I would put into a container so that I would have it ready the next time I wanted to make it. So this container has the sugar, the dried milk, salt, and 4 cups of bread flour in it. So I'm going to pour this into my container. Okay, and then I'm going to get my butter, and the butter I have melted. You don't have to do this, but I started doing this when I made bread sometimes, because it keeps, sometimes if you're using real butter, it doesn't soften very well, as you know, and so then it would get kind of caught into little clumps that on the outside of the crust instead of being mixed into the dough. Then the next thing I do is I make a little well in the bread mixture. Okay, so we have all our ingredients in, and as you can see, I made a little hole, or the term that they use in recipes is a well, and that's where I'm going to put the yeast. I buy it by the jar because it's a lot more cost effective that way. And then you put in 2 teaspoons of yeast into the well. And then something I do to like give a little boost to the yeast that the recipe does not call for is I put a little bit of honey onto the yeast to feed it. Because did you know that yeast is live? So I'm going to put some honey onto the yeast, just a little bit, and you can see what happens. It starts, look at that, because it's actually feeding the yeast, which is actually live. Okay, now we are ready to put it into the bread maker. Okay, so you just put this down into the bread maker, and it just kind of pops down in there. You just push on it. Whoa, okay. And then you close the lid, and then you select what you want here. Obviously first you have to plug it in. So okay, so my little view thing here, we want to select 1 because that's white bread, and also we're going to select
the loaf, and it's a 2-pound loaf, which it's already set for. And then we have 3 selections of kind of crust here, light, medium, or dark, and it's automatically set for the medium, which I just leave it at that. And so it should take 3 hours and 25 minutes. So we just push start. And peeping in, there we see it. Now we'll see what happens in 3 hours and 25 minutes. Okay, so our bread is done. Let's open it up and see what it looks like inside here. Oh, it's lovely. Awesome. Now, what we need to do is we need to take it out of here and let it sit for about 10 minutes before we take it out of the pan. Okay, so we're going to let this cool for about 10 minutes. For the bread, dumped it out of the bread pan. You can see how nice that came out. There's just a little bit on the paddle there, and that's where the paddle was. Now we need to turn it over so you can see what the top of it looks like. A really nice, huge loaf, 2-pound loaf of bread. And now we're going to slice it up in my bread slicer.